Hello, my name is Nan Cohen. I'm with Light Productions, and I'm the producer of Light Television. And I want to welcome you to another fun evening with Maverick Rabbi, Rabbi Gershon Winkler. Gershon comes to us from the Four Corners region of New Mexico. He is Missoula's visiting rabbi, and it is an honor and a privilege to have him here. Welcome to Introduction to Judaism number 12 with Rabbi Gershon Winkler. Tonight's topic he calls Bird Woman, Snake Man, and Miriam's Wellspring. Gershon writes, Gershon will introduce us to ancient oral traditions around the story of Passover, drawn from Aramaic and Hebraic Kabbalistic sources. Did you know that the ancient Hebrews were freed from bondage 3,013 years ago due to the facilitation of 7 women? Did you know the Red Sea parted on account of a guy named Snake Man? Did you know that Moses wandered several decades in Ethiopia before leading the Exodus from Egypt? Did you know that the Exodus to freedom was deliberately designed to be worse than the bondage in Egypt? Did you know you can learn about these details and more?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you can.
I'd like to introduce myself.
Here's Gershon.
Having done that, we can begin. Going to open up with a little chanter. You can help us to chant. Little chant. So you start, and I will follow. Ready?
Row, row, row.
Leave it to Mr. Rick. We have the honor of a visitor this weekend, a good friend of mine for a long time, good colleague of mine for a longer time. And got her name, Miriam Maron Emhoff from Magura Hills, California, where most of you are from anyway. And so she does workshops with me and does workshops on her own, does ceremonies. She's much wiser than I am. Everything I've taught you all these years is from her. And I'd like to ask her to lead us in a little chanter. It has to do with the theme of the evening, which has to do with Yerida Ve'ad Aliyah. I mean, descending for the sake of ascending. Okay, so Miriam also has, if you like, good, sweet music, healing music. Some of you here have already heard her music from an album. Her album is for sale. It's only $50 an album, and it runs for 5 minutes. So I'd like, just kidding, it really runs for 10 minutes, and it's $30. Not just kidding. I don't know how much it costs, but they're over there for you later. I'd like to introduce my good friend, Miriam.
Good evening. I'm going to ask you to participate in 2 ways tonight in this chant. Yerida Ve'ad Aliyah are the words in Hebrew. And as many of you know, Hebrew being one of the sacred languages, it has a certain vibration to it that you can feel whether you know the exact meaning or not. So again, it's Yerida Ve'ad Aliyah. Could you repeat it with me? Yerida Ve'ad Aliyah. Yerida Ve'ad Aliyah. So descension for the sake of ascension. So many times in our lives we end up feels like we're going through quicksand and it's really hard in these really low places. And sometimes that's what helps us lead up to some really amazing, beautiful places. And it's really hard to remember when we're down in those dark places. And I'm going to ask you to also help me with the rhythm, if you would. So it would go.
Thank you very much. We will now talk in the monotone along with the Dakota machine. So this time of the year, this is a great time of the year, it's springtime. It is a time of our celebration, the Jewish tradition, of a holiday called Pesach. Pesach is a holiday that has a very funny name to it, because the word without vowels does not just mean passing over, like they say in English. Really, the word comes from the word piseach, which literally means limping, and which literally means springing. So the word piseach has, if you study the etymology, or entomology, or is that insect? Etymology? Etymology. Etymology? Etymology. When you study etymology, you find that the word piseach, which is spelled exactly the same way as it is for Pesach, for Passover, it means both limping and springing. And so the ancient teachers tell us, in the Talmud, the rabbis 1800 to years ago, excuse me, a little burping my dinner. I will burp a little bit more later for you. So the ancient tell us that why is the word for Passover, Pesach, for that holiday, connote both limping and its opposite, springing. And they say because in order to spring, you have to limp. In order to leap, you must go down. You must bend at the knee. More than that, they said, in order to go very high in life, you have to, unfortunately, inevitably, experience a little low. The low brings you to the high. The lower you go, high you go. See, we're a very manic-depressive religion. It's part of our theology. You want to go high, you got to go low. What's the matter with you? You want to be a normal person? Go find something else to do. You want to be confused? Fall and rise and fall and rise, like the phoenix? Come to the right place. The whole story of Passover, the whole story of the Exodus, you see in the movie, The Prince of Egypt, so you know the story. That whole story is about that. I mean, here the people have been in slavery, in bondage, for 210 years. They finally get the opportunity to come out of the slavery. It's a great opportunity. But what they don't realize until the next day is that leaving Egypt is going to be a greater challenge than having been in Egypt. Because the moment they come out of Egypt, all of familiarity is gone. The moment they come out of Egypt, all of the sustenance that they could depend on in spite of the difficulties they had living there was gone. When they came out of Egypt, they came into a place that had nothing, no promise, no potential. They had no idea how long it would take for them to make this journey. They had this man in front of them with a big shtick who was leading them to the desert and leading them in a very roundabout way that was taking them way out of the way. Their ancestors had brought merchandise back and forth between Canaan and Egypt for years in just a 2-3 day journey or less. And here they were going to spend 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years. So there are a lot of teachings about what this journey means. How this journey is about going down in order to come up, like the song we just chanted. Yerida B'yad Aliyah is a concept that not only appears on this great album that's coming out at an album place near you, Miriam's second album. And it's also it's a concept like the other songs on that album, which are from the Kabbalah and from the Aramaic teachings that go back to the ancient mystical teaching that have to do with the way life is designed. That in order to move up, you have to be ready to face going downward. In the 16th century, there was a great Kabbalist. His name was Rabbi Isaac Luria. He lived in Tzfat, in Israel. Yeah, see, Jews live in Israel all the time, not just last week, and just move in. So, he was a great Kabbalist, a great mystic. And a disciple came to him one time and said, "Master, I have been studying, I have been praying, I have been evolutioning spiritually, I have been practicing, and I felt myself raised to great heights of revelatory experience. And all of a sudden I find myself falling lower and lower. Why is this?" And we sometimes experience that, you know? Things are going good, they're going great, they're getting euphoric. Why, they can't even get any better than they are. Life is perfect. And all of a sudden, pow! The rug is pulled from underneath us, and we go sliding down, or the whole floor is pulled from underneath us, and we go dripping down. And so Rabbi Isaac Luria said to the disciple as follows. He said, "It's only an illusion. You ain't falling nowhere." You see, what happens is that as you go higher and higher and higher, you ultimately, eventually reach the next level, the next plane of your unfolding. The problem is, since you're reaching the next new plane of unfolding, you are reaching what? The bottom of it. So the sensation is bottom, but the reality is you're going the next step. But reaching bottom is essential for the climb. You reach the bottom rung, he said, of the next plane, the next ladder, the next level. When the people come out of Egypt, they walk for 3 days. Vayelchu shloshet yamim. They walked for 3 days. V'lo matzu mayim. They found no water. It was a real letdown. A real letdown. Here all these miracles are described as happening to the people. They were freed miraculously from a nation from which very few slaves were ever able to break free at that time. They walked through this sea that parted for them. Everything was going just right. Miracle after miracle. And suddenly, they're in the desert, and there's no water, but they're not afraid because they've already been led on by the great trickster in the sky. And things are cool. Just keep walking. Keep having faith. Miracle after miracle. They were just walking through the desert. Don't worry, folks. There'll be water any minute now. And they're walking. Hours are going by. Half a day. Sun's going down. No water. Second day. You know, they're running out of Mountain Dew. Third day. This is ridiculous. What's going on here? Where is the one who opened up the doors for us to leave where it was not good for us to be? Where is the one that promised? And so they complained to Moses. Moses complains to God. This is the second time that happens. First time was at the Red Sea, Sea of Reeds, rather, where the people cried to Moses, "Help! The Egyptian army is coming from the rear. The sea is in front of us." And Moses cries to God, "Help! L'chaim." And God says, "What are you yelling at me? Lama titzak elai? What are you yelling at me for? What are you waiting for? Raise your hand over the sea. Do something. Demonstrate your faith. Don't just walk around waiting." It's like Rabbi Zalman Shachta Shalomi up in Boulder. He says, to many people, God is a great cosmic bellhop. He carries your luggage. No, we wait for God to pick up the suitcase. But the Torah tells us, when you see your fellow struggling with their load, it doesn't say help them. It does not say help them. Don't ever help anybody. What it does say is, Azov ta'azov imo, which means literally, help along with them. Because if I don't help you help me, you can't help me. If I'm not ready to be helped, you can't help me. You can give me the best drugs, the best medicine, best therapy. It'll do the gunish helfen, which is Aramaic for won't help you a bit. Well, actually, Yiddish. Thought I could fool some of you some of the time. It won't help. You got to help along with. And so, God says to Moshe, do something. Moshe says, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fight off the whole Egyptian army. We have no weapons. And we have people here are vulnerable. We have the elders. We have children. And I don't know how to walk through a sea without getting wet and drowning. And so God says, you got hands? Netei et yadcha. Lift your hands. Something. Anything. Make a move. Move your body. Anything. Don't just stand there. In fact, the ancients tell us that you know why the sea split? Not because of Moses raising his hand, but something else happened way down the shore of the Sea of Reeds. Way down the shore of the Sea of Reeds, there was a man named Nachshon. Nachshon is Hebrew for snake man. He was Nachshon, the son of Aminadav, the son of my people are ready to give. He was of the tribe of Judah. He was the leader of the tribe of Judah. You see him mentioned throughout the boring parts of the Torah, where it mentions the leaders of all the tribes. And the tribe of Reuben, blah, 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 blah. And the tribe of Shimon, blah, 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 blah. So he's mentioned there. So the Midrash, the ancient oral tradition of our people, tells us that way down the shore, while everybody was busy complaining to Moses, Nachshon said, hey, we have no choice but to move. And so he walked into the water. And he kept walking into the water. And the water got deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until it reached his nostrils. At that point, it split. And so the teaching is that, yeah, miracles happen. Yeah, things open up for us oftentimes when we think that they will not. But there is a little requirement. It's called helping along with the helper. It's called demonstrating that I am really ready for the help that I need. It's called making a move. Busting a move, you know? Making that step. Trying. Going for it. Little step. A scary step. The kind of step that people later take into the desert. Following this gentleman with a big stick who doesn't have a map. And that's why God says to Isaiah many, many hundreds of years later, not too many hundreds of years, 400 years later, God says to Isaiah the prophet, Zocharti lach chesed neurayich. Say to the people that I remember the grace of their youth. Ahavat kelulotayich, the love of our first engagement, our first encounter. Lechtech acharai bamidbar, when they followed me, after me, into the desert. Eretz lo zerah, a land with no seed, no potential. In other words, I remember the love they had when they walked after me into the unknown, into the uncertain, into the great I don't know. That has not been forgotten. That was a very holy event, walking for 3 days without water and having faith that it's going to come. But then what happened was that faith got shattered when it didn't come. And this was one of the tests. There were 10 lessons that the people had to learn in the desert. Because all of the journey in the desert for those 40 years was about this thing we glibly call faith. And the first test that they had to overcome was the test of, we really thought that there was going to be another miracle. And there isn't any. Everything was leading up to this, because what happens on the third day? What does it say? This is in the book of Exodus, chapter something or other. What happens? They walk 3 days, no water. Third day, they come to water. The sea was worth having faith, they said to themselves. They dipped their canteens into the water, and they drank it, and it's bitter. So that was called Mara, Meriva, the waters of bitterness. Because when they finally got to the promise that they had developed inside of themselves based on the miracles that had been happening all along, and it was a joke, it was a trick, it was a bad joke. It shattered their faith. At that point, they complained to Moses. Moses screams to God. And what does God respond with? Nothing. Not a sound. God responds with a very unusual act. A tree came down. It says, Adonai, the Infinite One, lowered a tree. Or another translation of that word, showed a tree, revealed a tree. By your aid. And a tree was shown. And then the tree was sent to the water like a messenger, and the water became sweet. And the people drank. And it was a very important lesson to them. To remember that I could build up all the hope and dreams of my life, all the visions, because things are going really good. Stage by stage, things are working out based on what happened yesterday. This is going to happen today. Everything is going to work out fine. It's not working out yet. Oh, this is not good. Oh, you see, check just came in the mail. Just when I needed $1,000. And I take this check just when I need it. It comes, it's so wonderful. And I go to the bank and I cash it. And then it bounces. It's basically what happened. This is the first bounce check. Bounces. The promise bounces. Now the difference is the bank won't sweeten it for you. They'll charge you. The difference is that though the check bounced, the hope vanished, the dream was shattered, the miracle was spoiled. The lesson was, so in other words, your whole obsession and consciousness is about the miracle happening? And what about the one who gives the miracle? Where does the vision get focused? On the gift that I receive and that I'm accustomed to receiving? What happens to the one who gives the gift? If that gets lost, I need to relearn my lesson. So God shows the tree, sends the tree to the water, the tree of knowledge, of good and evil, the tree of opposites, to remind the people, you know, you live in a world of opposites, of paradox and contradiction. How ready are you to walk the middle way? When I was a normal rabbinical student many, many years ago, well, I wasn't really a rabbinical student. I grew up in a very traditional Jewish way, and there's no such thing as rabbinical school. It doesn't exist in the Orthodox tradition. You go to yeshiva. No one goes to yeshiva to become a rabbi. You go to yeshiva to study, for the sake of studying. And at some point, they either invite you or they don't. And initiate you or they don't. But you don't go to yeshiva to study. Nowadays we have yeshiva university, a special thing, emulating the academic world. But in the ultra-Orthodox tradition, to this very day, nobody goes to yeshiva to become a rabbi. Unheard of. When they came to me and said, well, I'll make you a rabbi, I said, forget it. I don't want anything to do with it. It's not my thing. I just want to write books and check ingredients and products. So there I was going to school in the yeshiva, great yeshiva in Jerusalem, great yeshiva, about 28 of us, small little dinky place. And the old man, Rabbi Eliezer ben Zion, who ran the place, was teaching us about the doctrine, the theology of gift, of matana. And so it says to us like this. You have roommates, he says, in your dormitory. He spoke in Hebrew. You had roommates. That's Hebrew. Let us say, one morning you wake up in your room, and your roommate brings you breakfast. What is your response? Wow! You didn't, wow! Second morning, breakfast again. Wow, you should. Third night. Wow. Fourth night. Where's my breakfast? Am I saying night? Morning, right? Breakfast is in the morning? Sorry. It said, they're 7 hours later, they're 9 hours later. Next morning, fourth morning, breakfast. Where's my breakfast? You didn't make breakfast this morning? Or, I'm disappointed. I'm feeling disappointed. You didn't bring me my breakfast. Feivel, there's my breakfast. היה ארוחת בוקר שלי. מה איתך? See? But you see what happens? So he was pointing out the following. He was pointing out that in receiving gifts, again and again and again, what can easily happen eventually is that you are only receiving the gift, no longer the giver. That's why the Talmud says, "Anoten matana lechavero tzorich lehodio." If you give your fellow a gift, tell them about it. Don't buy somebody a gift and leave it at the doorstep anonymously. You do charity anonymously. You help the poor anonymously, the Talmud says. The Talmud says, may your right hand not know what your left hand is doing. May the one who gives not know who the receiver is. Right? But when it comes to giving a gift to a friend, it's an opportunity to connect, to embellish, to enhance the relationship, to yummy it, if you tell them about it. If they don't know who gave it, then they're just stuck with the gift, and that's nice too. But the opportunity of having able to connect with somebody and evolve, a relationship is gone. Therefore, it says in the Torah, what did Moses say to the people? It says, when you see your enemy, when you see the animal of your enemy struggling with their load, run to help them. The ancient rabbis add to that and say, let's say you're walking down the street and you see that son of a bitch, that enemy of yours. And you know what I'm talking about. We all know him. I have his address right here. And his animal is struggling with a load. And then you see your best friend over there with his donkey struggling with a load. So the ancient rabbis say, priority one, enemy. Why? Because this is an opportunity you cannot afford to dismiss. This is an opportunity to turn an enemy around to become a friend. The friend will be your friend. Maybe be your enemy because you didn't go help. I saw you help him, you now me. Right? All right. So you go help him next time. Be your enemy. But it's about the opportunity, taking advantage of the opportunity. It's about connecting with what is being given in the moment, not just the gift. So they're getting gift after gift after gift, miracle after miracle after miracle during this great Exodus adventure. And now they're walking and they're depending on the gift. How do we know this? Because when the gift comes and it's bitter, the check bounces. When we come to the bitter water, who do they scream to? Moses, the messenger, the pizza delivery boy. Right? It doesn't say they call to God and say, hey, what's going on, Yahweh? What's the matter with you? No, they yell at the pizza delivery man, not at the source of the gift. And so this was a lesson for them to remember that if you really want to keep getting gifts in life, do not lose sight of the giver, if you don't mind. You know, my daddy, he's 1,000 years old, my father, one of the oldest men on the planet. And to this day, every time my mother makes him something to eat, which is all the time, he says, thank you, in Danish. He's Danish, Viking. Mange tak for den mad. Wow. Like, you know, gee, what are you doing this for? You know? In many relationships, you know, it's like, guy comes home, sits down. Oh, the melech is the big king is the big schmendrick, right? Worked hard all day, sitting on his butt in the office, while the woman was chasing children all around, up and down the hills and around the house and milking the goats. Comes home, sits down, waiting, expectation. The meal comes, good. Blessed is the Lord. Gone. That's why women invented frying pans. They get heavier every year. Every generation they come heavier. Have to remember the source of the gift, not just the gift itself. So this is what they're learning in this Exodus. Speaking of paying attention to the source of the gift, the ancient rabbis tell us, now, when you read the story of the Exodus, they tell us, who are you focused on? Moses. Moses takes the people out of Egypt. Moses throws a stick on the ground, becomes a snake. Moses performs a miracle here and a miracle there, here a miracle, there a miracle, there a miracle. Moses raises his arms and the sea splits. Moses takes us out of Egypt. Moses takes us out. So the ancient rabbis tell us, hate to burst your bubble, but there's some greater source behind Moses. And we're not talking about God. We're talking about another group, another entity, another power involved in the exodus of the people. That is very subtle, but yet in the story. And we don't pay attention to it. And what is this entity, this power, this force, without which, the rabbis say, the exodus could not have happened? on a physical level. It wouldn't have happened. What was this force? It was a web of women. A web of women. A web of women. It was 7 women without whom the Exodus could not take place. B'zechut nashim tzidkaniot nigalu avotenu mimitzroim, they wrote, or they said. They didn't write back then. Oral tradition. Only the Torah was written down. Which means, in the merit of the women of Israel at that time, of the people of Israel, were the children of Israel, our ancestors, redeemed from bondage. Okay, that's sweet, very new agey and feminist conscious, especially for 1900 years ago, when this teaching is first mentioned in the school of Rabbi Akiva. Who are these 7 ladies? And where are they mentioned in the story? Or is it just an oral tradition? Akiva says they're mentioned throughout the story, except you're not paying attention. I'm not talking about you people here. I'm talking about the people who didn't come tonight. And it goes like this. Here are the 7 ladies. Lady number 1. The woman who gives birth to Moses. Very elementary, he said. Right? Her name was Yocheved. Yocheved. In English, I think they call her Ichabod. Poor woman. She was alive today, she'd run these people down. King James and all the Flemish translators. From Latin to English. And Greek to Latin. And Hebrew to Greek. So Yocheved, the mama of Moshe. Because she, number 1, she gives birth to the kid. Number 2, she ends up nursing him. She's even paid for it. And number 3, she dares to have him to begin with. Because you have to remember in the story, it says that it came to a certain period in the Pharaoh's life, and he decrees that all male children of the Israelites should be thrown into the sea. The oral tradition of our people, it is because the astrologers told them that the Redeemer of the people will be born in this month of Adar. And so therefore he didn't take any chances throughout that month. And that's when Moses was born. So Yocheved took the chance of giving birth, hiding the child, which leads us to 2 other women, Shifra and Puah, also mentioned in the book of Exodus as being 2 very great midwives whose job it was to report a newborn male child to the authorities. And so when they were questioned by the Pharaoh, why haven't you reported the baby? What did he say? What did they say? Dangerous thing. What did they say? They said they give birth very quickly, and I had no chance to find them. Well, they made up some kind of story. And so by doing that, they delayed. They dilly-dallied and prevented the soldiers from finding little baby Moses. Shifra and Puah, 2 midwives who delayed the situation further. Now, woman number 4, right? So you have Yocheved, the mama, and you have Shifra and Puah, the 2 midwives. Now, that's 3, right? So number 4 would now be Batya. No, let's go in order, chronological order. Miriam. It says, and when Yocheved finally had to hide the baby in the reeds, in the sea, in the river there, Miriam, his sister, followed him, kept an eye on him as he floated down river through the reeds. So she takes care of him, make sure he's safe. That brings us to woman number 5. That's Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, who reaches out, sees the baby, and pulls him in. Then Miriam comes and says, you want me to find, he's one of the Jewish babies probably, you want me to find a Jewish nursemaid? And Pharaoh's daughter says, what a great idea. You know anybody? Yeah, I sure do. Good. You get the kid to the nursemaid and we'll pay them really well to nurse the child. After which I want you to bring the child back to me and I will raise him in my palace. So Miriam takes the baby and her brother, brings him back to Yocheved, the mama, who gets a paycheck every month for nursing her own kids. The only time in all human history when mother got paid for mother. Good salary, benefits, health insurance, everything. Even got to wear Pharaoh's hat every now and then. So that's a lot of women. That's like 5 women so far. Got 2 more women to go. The 6th woman is Zipporah, bird woman. She's the one that Moses ends up marrying. She's the daughter of Jethro, the Midianite shaman of Midian. Now, what's she got to do with this? You know, supportive behind every successful man and a woman? Nah, it's more than that. She actually saves his life. When you read the story, what happens? Moses is at the burning bush. He argues with God. I don't want to go. Yeah, go. I don't want to go. 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 About 10 chapters. Finally, Moses gets hoarse. I don't want to go. And so he has to go. And so he goes and gets his wife, Zipporah, and their 2 boys, Gershon and Eliezer. And they're going on the way to Egypt. When all of a sudden it says, Vayibakish Adonai Hamito, and the Infinite One sought to kill him. We'll get to that, don't worry. The Infinite One sought to kill him. God sought to kill the man he had just argued with for 8 chapters. And finally got him to go on his mission, and now God sought to kill that bastard. Maybe God was so pissed. Could have run the whole world. I have worlds to run. This little warrior, you. That's how I interpret it. There are deeper meanings to this, which I will get to eventually. So what happens as Moses being swallowed up by the Spirit is Zipporah, his wife, grabs a flint stone. A stone. It's a very sharp stone that you find in the Judean desert. Very easy to find it too. You usually sit on it and yell. And she circumcises Gershon, the oldest boy, and then throws the foreskin at the feet of Moses, or according to the Kabbalistic tradition, at the feet of the spirit that was swallowing Moses, at which point Moses was left to live. So she saves his life. The mysterious meaning behind that little episode, I will share it with you. Let's just go through this thing. Let's do it. So Zipporah, his wife, saves his life. Very vividly, very clearly. He's almost dead. She saves his life. If she didn't save his life, he couldn't go to Egypt to take the people out. I mean, who would listen to a dead man coming in there? Hi there. The 7th woman is another mystery. She is mentioned among the Israelites who come down into Egypt 210 years earlier. And she is mentioned among, well, actually more than 200 years. And she is mentioned among the Israelites who come out of Egypt. So she's mentioned twice in the book of the end of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus, people who are going out of Egypt. And she's listed again in the book of Numbers, 40 years later, when they're counting the leaders of all the clans. And she's mentioned as one of them. Her name is Serach. Not Sarah. Serach. Now, who is Serach? And what does she have to do with the Exodus? So the ancient teachers tell us, well, you see, way, way, way back, when Joseph was in Egypt. Remember the story? Joseph in Egypt with the many petticoated collar, whatever. So, Joseph is in Egypt, and the brothers come to Egypt, the ones that sold him down the river, and he makes peace with them, and he gives them food to take back to Canaan, and they decide to bring their daddy to come see his son, who he hasn't seen. But on their way back to Daddy Yaakov, Jacob, they're worried because this man is in his hundreds. And they're going to break the news that the youngest son, next to the youngest son, whom he had been mourning and grieving for over 20 years, is still alive, and would kill him. The good news would kill him. People have died. I read an article about a guy who came home to a surprise party. He died of a heart attack. Surprise! You know, it's worse than a bounce check. So they were afraid of this. So the ancients tell us that what they did was they had a meeting on the way home, a circle. And Asher, one of the brothers, stood up and said, "You all know my daughter, your niece, somebody's niece, but my daughter for sure. Her name, Sarah. Sarah, my daughter, you know her. She is a dancer. She is a storyteller. And she is a singer. Let her storytell, dance, and sing the news to the old man. And that way it'll enter his heart gently." And so she sang and danced and storytold, "Joseph, oh Joseph, oh Joseph, Joseph is still alive." And Jacob was very cynical, skeptical, and doubtful about it, because he had been grieving the death of Joseph all these years. That he said to her, "My sweet, sweet daughter, Joseph is alive, like you're gonna live forever." And so she did. So she's mentioned throughout the stories, again and again and again. Hundreds of years later, there she is. And these are the leaders of the clans that came out of Egypt: Eliud ben Shedeur, Nachshon ben Aminadab, Serach, the daughter of Asher. What's she still doing here? Now you know the rest of the story. But what we still don't know is, what has she got to do with the Exodus? So there's a 500-year-old lady living there. What's that got to do with the Exodus? I will tell you. Because in the book of Genesis, toward the end, when Joseph is dying, he makes the Hebrews swear to him that in the future, when you will be led out of this place, "V'ha'alitem et atzmotai itcham mizeh," and you shall take out my bones with you from this place. So the contingency of the people leaving Egypt was taking out the bones of Joseph with them. Even Moses knew about this hundreds of years later, because in the book of Exodus it says, "Vayikach Moshe et atzmo Joseph," and Moses took the bones of Joseph. Listen. See? So where did Moses know where the bones were? Okay, the promise the people remembered from generation to generation to generation. But where did Moses know to look for the bones? So the ancients tell us, he went to the oldest woman in the world, who had been there from the very beginning when Joseph had made the people promise. Through his funeral, watched where the Egyptians had buried him in the great tombs, knew exactly which tomb. And so she is the one who told Moses. Because Moses knew that you cannot just leave without fulfilling the promise. That you cannot make the promise of redemption happen without fulfilling your own promises. You want God to keep your promise, or its promise to you, better look and see how you're doing with your own promises to others. It's like in our tradition, when Yom Kippur comes, forgiveness happens when you forgive others. The Talmud says, one who does not want to forgive somebody else on Yom Kippur, don't bother going to the synagogue to ask for forgiveness. That's why in Jewish tradition the word for forgiveness is mechila, which means beginning. Because oftentimes it's humanly impossible to forgive. But it's not humanly impossible to begin to forgive. And the word mechila is related to the word mechel, which means begin. So actually the word for forgiveness in Hebrew literally means begin. So, these are the 7 ladies. I will write their names for you to remember. They're very important ladies. So first there was Yocheved. Then there was Miriam. Then there was Batya. Daughter of God, it means literally. Which is probably the Hebraic version of how she was known in the Egyptian world. Because, the daughter of the Pharaoh was like daughter of the gods. And then there was Shifra, the 2 midwives, Shifra and Puah. It's interesting, Shifra and Puah, the 2 midwives, their names mean 2 different ways in which birthing, or the experience of birthing is expressed. It's expressed through ah, and it's expressed through ah. And that's what these words mean. Shifra means shafir, smooth. Puah means crying out. Next lady, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is Zipporah, bird woman. We will talk about that strange incident in the desert on the way to the mission. Funny thing happened to Moses on the way to the mission. And the 7th lady, her name is Sarah. And there you have it. Now let us go to Zipporah, bird woman. Very strange incident in the Hebrew scriptural story of Moses going to the land of Egypt to take the people out. Not in the way them. I don't mean like take them out, like redeem them. But some of you are still watching The Sopranos. So he's on his way. After standing and talking to this bush for a couple of hours, God finally convinces him to go against all of his hesitations. God gives in to Moses and says, okay, how about if I send Aaron, your brother, to meet you halfway? All right. Got a deal. So God meets Moses halfway. And Moses goes and fetches Zipporah, his wife, and his 2 sons, Gershom and Eliezer, and it says in the text, he puts them on the donkey, and they take off to Egypt. And along the way it says, Vayifka b'malon, and they arrived at the hotel. It's the first mention of a hotel in the Holy Bible. Malon, modern Hebrew for hotel, taken from the ancient word malon. Comes to the hotel. Strange word, malon. Because you know what else malon is related to? It's related to the word milah. Milah, malon. Milah is, of course, in circumcision. Milah, malon. He came to the malon, to the milah. What is circumcision? Well, it's a terrible thing if you do it pediatrically in a surgical room. It's more of a sacred 3-second thing if you do it with a very ultra Orthodox mind, who says, Baruch atah, it's done. As opposed to in surgeries or more progressive models where it takes hours and hours and the kids screaming, horrifying. But in the ultra-Orthodox, very traditional way, it is 1, 2, 3, a little Manischewitz, it's done. Mostly the mother drinks to Manischewitz. Okay, what is circumcision? What does it mean in our tradition? Every tradition has different reasons for it. So Mila is about unveiling. It's about unveiling. It's about removing the veils that separate my passionate self from the divine. There's my passionate self, and there's the divine. When I come to the divine, I come like this. I come humbly. I leave all my demons behind, leave all of my passions behind. I come to pray. I say, hello, how you doing? I have no passion, how are you? Right? I have no lust, I have nothing. Mila is about unveiling, saying, I come before you and I stand before you, O Creator, totally expose my deepest passion, my deepest light, my deepest shadow. I am totally open to you. So then they ask, well, why don't we do something to the women? So Rabbeinu Bachai Ibn Asher in the 15th century said, because, face it, the ladies already got it. There's nothing between them and the divine. A man needs to work a little harder. You know, he's always got something in his way. He's got to always remove these cobwebs and things to get to the divine. Whereas the woman is more closer to the divine, more connected to the divine. I mean, face it, folks. You watch CNN like I do. You know, who's out there making all the wars? I don't see my grandmother out there. She's home cooking blintzes. Well, not anymore, but she used to when she was alive. So, I'm not saying anything derogatory about men. I used to be a man too. But the fact is, there is a great difference between the genders, and each one has their own challenge in life. And that's why men have, in the traditional sense, have more stuff they got to do in the practice. Women can do, but are not obligated to do. Okay, that's another evening, another discussion. So, Moses is coming to a place of veil. Why? What does that mean? It means that here's a man who has just finished arguing with God, trying to get out of a mission that he felt he was not worthy of, he felt he was incapable of. Finally, he accepts the mission. In that moment, he goes with the mission. In that moment, he goes with the vision. In that moment, he goes with the purpose. In that moment, he gets absolutely in sight of nothing but the mission. Let me backtrack just a little bit. There is a common theme through these stories. The common theme goes two ways. Number one is always the youngest. Always the youngest. The youngest son of Abraham, Isaac. The youngest son of Isaac, Jacob. The youngest son of Jacob, before Benjamin is born, Joseph. Right? The youngest son of Yocheved, Moses. There is a very peculiar theme throughout these stories that the youngest is the one that is picked on, that is finagled into situations beyond their capacity in the beginning. The youngest one is catapulted into a place where they have to discover their power. You continue to go into the place, who becomes the king of Israel and the leader of the dynasty of the kingship in ancient times, the youngest son of Jesse, Yishai, David. David is the youngest of the sons. Who's the first king? Shaul, who is from the youngest of the tribes of Israel. Young. That's theme number one. Theme number two, death. In order to start your new thing, you got to die. You got to face death in the eye and be right there, ready to go. From that, you come into new life, new power. A people is born. Not accidentally do we therefore find the story of the two brothers, Ishmael, the father of the Arabian nations, Isaac, the father of the Hebrew nations. Their story of near death, side by side practically. Practically side by side. One episode after the other. First we have the story of Ishmael being thrown out of the house of Abraham. And his mother takes him to the desert, and they have no water. They run out of water eventually. Ishmael is dying. She throws him into the bushes, gives up on him. The angel comes and says, don't worry. I'll make a great nation out of him. He's going to live. Like Yidad Elohim et Anar, and God raised the child. And a wellspring appears, a be'er, and she sees. And she lifted her eyes and she saw the wellspring. And she gave her son water. He becomes the father of many peoples. 12 tribes too, by the way. Next story after that, Isaac. God says to Abraham, take your boy Isaac, sacrifice him. Which any one of us would have done, as I've mentioned many times before, because Isaac was 37 years old at the time. If you follow biblical chronology. He's still living in the house, he has no job, he has no girlfriend, enough already. Take the son of a bitch out there and sacrifice him. This was the ancient way of, doing Robert Bly kind of rituals. Still living at home, 37 years old. So when they come down the mountain after the near sacrifice, it says Sarah dies at 127. She gave birth to him at 90. That makes him 37 years old. Not like in the little golden book things in the movies. So, everybody has to face a near-death experience in order to create something very powerfully, potently new for the peoplehood. Whether it's for other nations, whether it's for our nation. Then comes Moses. Moses is now going to have to do two things that he was empowered to do by these two women, Yocheved and Batya. These two ladies, each one empowered him on a mission that he was later to perform without knowing it when he was a baby, because in those days, the mama is the one that named the kid. And in those days, and still today in many cultures, many Aboriginal cultures, when you name a child, you invoke a power into them. You imbue them with a power. Yocheved named Moses the following. His Hebrew name, which we don't use, in honor of the daughter of Pharaoh, who raised him. See, you got to give credit where credit is due. Yocheved named Moses Avi Gedor. That's his Hebrew name. Nobody else in all of Missoula knows this. Moses' Hebrew name was Avi Gedor. Avi Gedor means, translation, father of structure or boundary. First empowerment. Because what does Moses do later when he gets a job? He gives the people structure. Brings down the Torah, he brings down the laws, the teachings. Batya, it says in the Bible, gives him a name, Moshe. Moses, right? Moshe, which is Egyptian, or at least back then. Kimi namayim yishitiu. For I drew him out of the waters. So she gives him the name Moshe, which means draw out. So she empowers him to draw the people out of Egypt, out of bondage. So these two women empower Moses with fathering nation, peoplehood, way of life, with fathering liberation. So Moses is la-di-dying down the road with his family on his way to perform a mighty fine mission, which he'll be written up in all the papers across Egypt, across the Nile region, the Great Delta. And he comes to the Malon. He bumps right into the foreskin, right into the veil that covers, that blinds, that doesn't let you go any farther because you haven't experienced exposure. You haven't stepped outside of all the stuff that's held you back. How are you going to go and take the people out of their stuckness, out of Egypt, out of slavery, when you yourself are stuck in this old pattern of being so inside of yourself you can't move? You had a mission, and that's all you have. You can't free anybody if you only have a mission. A mission also requires exposure, which means it requires the unveiling of the heart. It requires the unveiling of the passion. How do we know Moses didn't have the passion to do this? Because he was just arguing for 10 chapters. I don't want to go. So he still now has to break through the veil that blocks the passion. Now, but what passion? I mean, if it's blocking a passion, that means he does have a passion. Now, does he have a passion or does he not have a passion? How many of us have had a passion back in the 60s, the 70s, 80s? Passion, civil rights, peace. We fought and we bombed buildings. We burned draft cards. We burned bras. We burned whatever we could. And then years go by and we wear ties. And we cut our hair, our long, long hair, except for some of us like Rick and I myself. And, you know, all of a sudden, what happened? Is the passion gone? Well, life has changed, things have changed, we just have different jobs. Like Moses, he had a great passion for civil rights, for the rights of the people, to the point that he took it to the extreme and slew an Egyptian taskmaster who was beating on a Hebrew slave. It tells us in the story, before he gets to Midian where he meets his wife. He grows up as an Egyptian prince. He sees someone beating on a Hebrew slave. He knows he's related to these people. Kills the Egyptian taskmaster. Now he has to flee. They want to arrest him. They suspect this orphan that the Pharaoh's daughter had raised in her house. Maybe he's one of those Jewish babies that she found. Seize him, the Pharaoh yells. And Moses flees. When you hear the word seize, you flee. And he flees, he goes to Ethiopia, Josephus tells us. So does our oral tradition in general. Midrash tells us he fled to Ethiopia, where he lived for many years as a great warrior. They didn't make that in the movies. They left it out. See, they don't consult us. They write movies and stories about our people, our history, and they never consult us. It could have been a much more fun movie. Can you imagine Moses coming to Ethiopia and fighting this great battle on behalf of an Ethiopian tribe? They make him their chief, and he lives there and for a long time, you know, like Conan the Barbarian, sitting there on his throne, you know, with a big fur thing. What a fun movie would have been. Hey, he leaves Egypt and goes straight to Midian, he marries a woman, and he's got a stick, he turns dust to a bush, and the movie's over. Unbelievable. He's 80 years old when he gets to Egypt. A lot of things happened between the time he left Egypt. Silly movie makers. Anyway, I don't want to get into that now. Another evening. So Moses does have passion, but being kicked out of Egypt and wandering so many years, he has nowhere to go with it. So he ends up taking a job with a big corporation, becomes a CEO of a sheep company in Midian, and he herds his sheep, and he just subdues, sublimates, negates all that passion. What can he do? When you can't do something about something that really is your passion, you eventually just have to let it go. Or just bury it deep within the recesses of your consciousness. Then he comes to the bush, and he sees the bush burning, not being consumed. And he's drawn to it because that's him. Burning, but it's not connecting. I mean, if it would have been me, I would have just put the thing out. I would have put out the fire. Get me a bucket of sand and put it out. Any one of us, right? And at the University of Montana, in the Department of Religion, they would have spoken about, and there was one short-lived religion called Judaism, 3,013 years ago. It was founded by a man named Abraham and died with a man named Winkler. And extinguished the revelation. Right? What drew Moses to the bush? It says that he left the road, the path, to see what this was. Because something in the bush spoke to him. Not just an angel of God speaking to him, but the bush spoke to him. The fact that it was on fire, like he was on fire. But it wasn't burning, like he wasn't burning. And so so God says, hey, all this passion you had back in the civil rights movement days and everything, I'm giving you the opportunity, go and do it. Moses says, I can't. Send somebody else. Got credit cards, I got house payments, I really can't do this. Really, you should go. I don't know how to talk to the Pharaoh. Really, go. What if they ask me what your name is? Really, go. Back and forth. Finally, Moses gives in, God gives in, they make a deal, Moses goes. But that's not enough. You can't just go with the gift. You have to go with the heart behind the gift. You can't just go with the mission. You have to also have the spirit behind the mission. You have to have your passion. So Moses comes to the foreskin, to the hotel. I know you're all going to feel funny now going to a hotel.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to call up your travel agent and say, I'm looking for a foreskin in Denver, Colorado. Hello? 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 Unbelievable. He comes to the foreskin, and he begins to get swallowed. It says, and God sought his death. It doesn't say God sought to kill him, as is often translated in English. It says God sought his death. Just like God sought the death of Ishmael, the father of the Arabian people. And God sought the death of Isaac, father of the Jewish people. God sought the death of Jacob, father of the 12 tribes, as he wanders through the desert, not knowing where he's going to go. Everybody has to face a near-death experience in order to give birth. The woman I haven't called in over a week faced a near-death experience when she gave birth to me. She speaks about it often. Every phone call, bi-weekly basis. When I gave birth to you, it wasn't easy. Really sorry. I would have made it easier if I would have known how. Honestly, you could call. Retroactively, it would make it easier. Moses didn't know what to do. He's just a man, straightforward. Give me okay, I've got the mission. I'm going to Egypt. What's going on here? Why am I being swallowed up by this foreskin? But bird woman knew. Because bird, in the Hebrew tradition, represents two things. Represents tikva, hope, and represents chofish, freedom. Hope and freedom, the bite. tweet, 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 tweet. Many different teachings in the Talmud about different birds. You see an eagle, it's a time of compassion. The moment you see the eagle, pray for compassion, bring it down. You see a vulture, it's an omen for new life, because the vulture carries the breath of life that it had taken from an animal that died, that was dying. You see an owl, it's a time of mystery. Surrender yourself to what now lays before you. If you see a raven, whatever it does or tells you, you do the opposite. It's the contrary. Tzipora is the boy in the terms of finch, sparrow. That kind of bird represents freedom. Then you have the turtle dove, which represents tikva, hope. It's like Noah sends out the turtle dove and comes back with hope. A little branch of an olive thing. He brings it back and says, the world is resurrecting. There's new life in the world. It is not hopeless. So bird woman, who knows the mystery of freedom, knows how to free Moses. She takes the flint and she circumcises what is not circumcised. Now you might ask the question, what about the second boy? Why does she only circumcise the oldest boy? What about Eliezer, the younger boy? The answer to that is, we have answers to everything. No, we're an old religion. We figured it all out. The answer to that is that in those days, when an outsider joined the Midianite people, which is the people Tzipporah was from, her father was the Kohen, the priest of Midian, your firstborn child belonged to that culture. Any child born thereafter belonged to your culture. See, they figured out intermarriage really well. They made a compromise. Your first kid belongs to our religion, mommy's religion, second kid, and on, all yours. So therefore, Eliezer, the second son, was circumcised because he was Jewish. He belonged to Moses' tradition. But the first son, Gershon, was not, because he belonged to the Midianites. So this was also a way of Tzipporah going in a commitment to Moses' people in the act that she did. But in the fact that she knew what to do, she was very connected to the Spirit and knew exactly what to do in that moment. The act of throwing the foreskin at the feet of Moses, or the feet of the Spirit, was the act of sending the very thing that was blocking, using the very weapon, so to speak, the very medicine, like you would do if you had a snake bite. You would use snake venom to cure yourself. If you were dying of snake venom, you would have to go to someone who had snake venom to cure yourself. It's a very beautiful mystical teachings, of which there are many more, about healing. Healing requires one to go into what it is that makes us. Peace requires you to go into the war, into the conflict. Not to deny the conflict, not to get rid of the conflict, not to slaughter the conflict. It requires you to go into the conflict, because the conflict is an arena of opportunity to turn it around. Like the man, your worst enemy, who's standing there with his donkey, and you're told to go to him, to help him out before you help out your friend, because there is an arena of opportunity. Conflict is an opportunity. We don't know how to deal with conflict these days. Everything in our culture is black and white. This is bad, this is good. Conflict requires you to walk into it. Not to be at war with conflict, because then there's conflict, right? Requires you to look conflict in the eye and see this is an opportunity to turn my life around, my family's life around, my children's life around, my neighbor, my community. Because if there's a war and it bothers me, I need to look to see if there's a war going on here. Also, there's there a war going on in my heart? There's a war going on in my home. There's a war going on between me and my wife, me and my spouse, me and my lover, me and my family, me and my children, me and my boss, me and my community, me and my neighborhood, me and my neighbor. There's a lot of war going on. It's so easy to go out there and fight the war. But the wars, when there's conflict, it's a reminder to us also to go deep inside, because that's where the conflict is. If we don't work on the conflict here, there will always be conflict out there. Always. Guaranteed, or you're going to win. Third woman knows how to heal the tragedy that's happening in front of her eyes. She heals it with the very thing that's killing Moses. The veil that blocks the passion. So whether you take this story literally or metaphorically, it's not important. Rabbi Akiva said, Kalamatakin Toha Kipshuto Badai, which is Aramaic Hebrew for one who interprets these stories. Well, and the Torah, texts, and scriptures, literally alone, is a falsifier. Great teaching by one of the greatest rabbis, first century. If you interpret the stories literally, everything literally, and you stay there, you lie. You're living in a falsehood. Because mythology, a people's story, is not about fact. It's about truth. If I get caught up in the fact of the story, then I lose out on the truth of the story. Then the lessons the story is trying to convey are totally lost to me because I'm stuck with the fact. I'm stuck with the mission, no passion. I'm stuck with the gift, I don't know from who. I'm stuck with the miracle, if I got from where. And this finally brings us to the wellspring. The ancient tradition tells us that, well, okay, they're walking through the desert for 40 years. We know there are a little couple of oases here and there, but for 40 years, for 2.5 million people, how did they do it? So the ancient rabbis tell us that there's an old oral tradition called Miriam's well, the wellspring of Miriam. That the wellspring of Miriam followed the people through the desert. What does that mean? And why Miriam? Because that's what her name means, by the way. Miriam. It's 2 words. It's Old Hebrew for master of the sea. Mir means master of, someone who has mastered something. And Yam means the sea, the ocean, the waters, the water power. She is the master of the water. This is why she is given the assignment of following Moshe as he is floating through the crocodile-infested river. She is the one that walks what in the book of Malachi, the prophet Malachi, it says, Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. When he lists this, he said, who took the people out of Egypt? Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. And Miriam is considered among the leaders, the leading prophetess of the Exodus. Now, her power of the water has to do with what is water. Water is life. Water is death. See, like this water is life. If I inhale it, I'm out of here. I'm gone. Everything in life that gives us life is also that which can kill us. Air can kill you too. People who die from oxygen. Too much going in too fast into your lungs can kill you. Chocolates can give you life, also take away your life. Everything that we have in the world is there has both life and has death. Has both components. We live in a universe of paradox and contradiction. This too opposite this did God create. Book of Proverbs by King Solomon. Miriam lives between those two worlds. The ancient tradition tells us like this. The oral tradition tells us Torah Sheba'al Peh. So we have a Torah Sheba'al and Torah Sheba'al Peh. We have the written Torah and we have the oral Torah. So most people who study our Torah and they don't read our oral Torah come away with a half-assed interpretation of our scripture. So the oral tradition tells us that when the decree, forget the decree, but when the people were slaves in Egypt, they decided at some point, when it got really hard, because it tells you progressively how it gets harder and harder, they decided not to have any more children. They decided not to have sex, not to make love. Because why bring children into this world? Into the slavery, into the hardship, into the pain, into the death. So one day, Miriam, the oral tradition tells us, came to her father and to her mother and said, "So, you're part of this conspiracy too, huh?" They said, "To not have children?" Said, no, I'm talking about Pharaoh's conspiracy. Pharaoh's destroying us with his decrees, with the bondage, with the intensification of labor. And now you, as leaders, and the others who are following your cue, have decided to help the Pharaoh annihilate the people, weaken the people, destroy the people, by not bringing children into the world, by not making love, by not connecting. And so her words went straight to their hearts, and they realized how right she was, because she spoke from a place of what? Water, which is nurturance, water, which is birth, waters which is life, waters, which is wellspring. And I'll explain what that means. See, when you're standing at a great waterfall and it's roaring, it's so powerful, intimidating, fatal, then you follow the waterfall. You come to a raging river, and you follow the river. And it comes to a stream, a creek. You follow the creek. I was in West Virginia for a while. It made me say creek. And then in New Mexico, it made me say creek. I don't know what they say here. Creek. All right, I get it. Creek. And then you follow the creek, it becomes a stream. You follow the stream into a little tiny nothing, a little trickle coming out of a rock somewhere. Try it. Follow a river sometime. A raging, mad river. Follow it all the way to its source. You'd be surprised what's there. Usually very little. A little trickle that then becomes a stream, but then given power by the contours of the earth, becoming a creek that then becomes a river that then becomes a humongous waterfall. Miriam, the ancients tell us, had the power of vision. And the power of vision is one that enables one to stand by the roaring waterfall and still see the wellspring. It enables one to stand at greatest tragedy of life in moments of great upheaval. And yet, in that moment, know that way behind that great upheaval is a trickle. That nothing is as huge and as overwhelming and as intimidating as it appears. all the way back, becomes nothing. So she was able to tell the people, what are you doing? She was able to restore to the people in their hardship the wellspring. And therefore she creates by her action and by her encouragement of reminding the people of the wellspring behind the waterfall, behind the great power, it becomes known as, here she is, becomes known as the Be'er Shel Miriam, the wellspring of Miriam. This power of Miriam follows the people through the desert. She continuously feeds them with hope, with faith, with reminder of the trickle that is behind the loudness of the circumstance that they experience. Whether it's a circumstance of no food, a circumstance of no water, a circumstance of no more hope, no more faith, she constantly reminds them. And therefore, it says in the Torah, after she dies in the middle of the desert journey, it says, they found no water. And that has the whole story of Moses being told to speak to the rock, and he hits the rock. No one knows how to bring water correctly. No one knows how to be in the water place, because the woman who gave the people the power of the trickle of the wellspring was gone. So it was a web of women. Bischut Nashim Tzidkoniot, in the merit of righteous women of our ancestral times. Nigalu Avotenu Mimitzroyim, were our ancestors redeemed from Egypt. And now you know the rest of the story. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
That's several. I'm just curious, how long did the plagues go on before, I mean, was it like, what was the time lapse? Is there any reference to that?
Well, the movie was what, like 30 seconds?
Prince of Egypt is a montage for much. It was like a year or, from the beginning to the end.
There are teachings about that in the Talmud, and I have totally forgotten what it said.
And the other question was,
But I could, if you email me and remind me, I will look it up in my library and give you the answer. I really don't know the answer.
and the other one was, did Moses know who he was? I mean, from as a little boy, he knew that this was his mom and that
Yes.
this was his mom. And
Because the Torah itself tells us, the movie didn't, but in the Torah, in the movie they have to make a storyline, because no one told them that he was in Ethiopia, so they could have had a story right there. So in the Torah text itself, in the scriptural text itself, it tells us that Yocheved, he's brought back to Yocheved to be nursed. And so he's with his sister, he's with his mother. The daughter of Pharaoh knows Miriam already, because they connected to the whole thing. So it's clear that Moses knows. And that's why it says he went out amongst his brothers and he saw an Egyptian beating on a Hebrew, and so on and so forth. So there's quite sufficient evidence in the literal text itself that he was aware of his identity.
And the snake man, I mean, is there more information about him? I mean,
Yes. Snake Man. Snake Man, the mighty warrior. Snake Man, he was also a great trickster. Because that's the meaning of the word snake in Hebrew, nachash. Nachash means to trick. So the story of Snake Man, the commentaries point out, is a story like, where did that story come from? We all thought Moses was raising his hand. Or like in the Mel Brooks movie, there was a guy behind Moses with holding him up. His hands up and the sea split. You didn't see that movie? It's very important. You're watching the wrong movie. It's Prince of Egypt. You got to see History of the World, Part 1. Find a lot of answers to your questions about Judaism and Jewish history, the first century and even before. So the idea of the snake is shaking one out of their stupor, like the two people in the Garden of Eden. Right? They're in a stupor. They're in a lifeless place. There's no life in paradise unless you've experienced being outside of it. There's no closeness to God because you've never known distance from God. There's no sense of good because you've never known bad. So he's just kind of there. And so the snake is sent on a mission to trick them into getting into trouble so they can leave. Of all the trees may you eat except that one was a clear case of entrapment, a clear case of a sting operation. It was all planned and moved and manipulated to get them out of the Garden of Eden so that they could make their journey back from the outside, which is why God places them east of Eden. Otherwise what's the difference where they went? Just kick them out. They're deliberately placed in the east of Eden, where the journey with the sun from east to west is to go back toward the garden. But now coming back to it, having been outside of it. So the snake's role in life, metaphorically speaking, is shaking us out of the stupor. And that's why when Moses is standing there arguing with God in the bush, God says, what do you have? Mazeh b'yodecha. What do you have in your hand? He says, mateh, a shtick. So God says, throw it to the ground. He throws it to the ground, what does it become? A giraffe? No. It becomes what he needs it to become. A snake. What was once alive and now is dead, his passion, and in this case his stick, was once a living tree and now it's dead, becomes a snake, comes alive, teaching to him that there is no such thing as something you used to have, an old dream, an old hope you had is totally dead. You can always be resurrected. You can always be brought back to life again through the trickster. What is the trickster? Trickster is those things in life that shake you out of your sense of stuckness, for better or for worse. And later on, Moses builds a copper snake, right? And and the people are being bitten, they're being attacked by snakes, it says, all of a sudden in the desert. And those who looked upon the copper snake that he built, that he sculpted, were no longer being bitten. So what does that mean, metaphorically speaking? It means that as long as I resist the trickster in my life, the things that are trying to shake me out, they'll come back and bite me even harder. But if I take it in, I'll get myself out of my situation. The greatest trickster is the Creator, who is described by Moses as like a mother eagle stirring its nest, forcing its young out, who then fall to their death or their life, depending on. So as they're falling out of the nest, struggling for survival, they learn their power, that they can fly. So when the snake shakes us out of our stupor, things that come into our life and interrupt our flow, it is an opportunity to discover something new about ourselves, something new about our power. So Nachshon, the story of Nachshon, the story of a man who went into the water until it reached his nostril. A man who dared to defy the status quo of things. The people were stuck in this stupor of hopelessness. And so he shakes them out by doing something crazy. And from that, the Zohar, the ancient mystics write, Kabbalistic text of the Zohar, it says, Ein tu'alta lechachmata b'li shitut, which is Aramaic for there is no life in wisdom. There's no aliveness in wisdom, no purpose to wisdom without clowning around. Because the sanctity of clowning around is to shake people out of where they are. So if somebody does something crazy, it catches your attention. It shakes you up, gets you a little uncomfortable. Maybe you start laughing, maybe you walk out, right? When I did a service one time and I turned to the ark and said, red light, green light, 1, 2, 3. A lot of people walked out. Yes?
So, nobody asked me when I was like a week old whether or not I wanted to go through this particular ceremony. And I wonder, is it because of Spatia that now these strange men creep into our rooms and the skin, all the male, inhabitants of the Jewish,
Ian Sipora,
yeah.
because of her, I wouldn't blame everything on her. I know you weren't asked. If you would have been asked, you probably would have said, thanks. But, some other time. We'll do lunch. Because I know Rabbi David Zaslav, great rabbi in Eugene, Oregon. Fine young man. And he decided not to circumcise his son. He just felt he just couldn't do it. So his son grows up, becomes about 6 years old, 7 years old, and says to his father, I want to do this. You learn about it, you read about it, you see Dad looks different than you do. And it was a lot more painful. More of a surgical procedure when you get older. I've been through circumcisions of adults. It's a very, it has to be under anesthetics. The sleeve is a whole surgical thing, and you have to do it in a hospital with an oil. Especially in the time when Jews came out of Russia. A lot of them had not been circumcised. They wanted to be circumcised. So if you're going to do it, it's better to do it when the kid is really young. So you don't remember anything except Manischewitz. You wonder why you have this addiction. Manischewitz wine. I have an addiction to it. I can't drink any other kind of wine but Manischewitz. Just stuck a cock full of that stuff in my mouth. These kinds of rituals, we go to other people who do rituals that are similar in some ways to different parts of the body. We go, ooh, wow. Looking at it from the outside, it's a very disgusting, terrible, barbaric thing. You have to be there. I don't mind being circumcised. If they want to do it again, it's fine. My age was different. Rabbi Isaac of Akko was approached by a philosopher who lived in the 1100s, who said to him, I've been studying your religion, and I see you have some really disgusting, barbaric stuff in your rituals. You have ridiculous stuff like circumcision, like red cow ritual, dead bird, live bird ritual. I thought you were an enlightened people. What kind of nonsense is this? So Isaac of Akko said, he was a great mystic, a great teacher. He said, once upon a time, the rabbis always answered the questions they didn't know the answer to with parables. That way you get caught up in a parable and you forget what the question was. It was a very nice story I heard. So he said, once upon a time there was a man who lived way in the jungle. Never seen another human being, like Tarzan. They stole all these stories from us. So he'd never seen another human being. One day, he notices a village, a habitation. So he, curious, he comes to it and he sees, wow, structures, other creatures like myself. He rushes to one of the structures and peers through the window to see what's going on. He sees a woman and a man embracing each other and struggling with each other and sweating and moaning and groaning and screaming, and fluids are flying all over the place. So he bursts through the door and he pulls them apart and says, what the hell are you doing? Disgusting. And he said, we're in the middle of connecting sky and earth, creator with creation, feminine with the masculine. We're also in the middle of creating a new human being. He said, bullshit. He goes, that's disgusting. You tell me that? It's doing that? Yucky. Totally on you. And he runs back to the jungle. So Rabbi Isaac of Akko said to the philosopher, you see, my friend, like the man who lived in the jungle and never saw another human being, you come to us from outside of our way. And so to you, it looks nonsensical. Just like it looked to the man who never seen human beings do their stuff. Another example he gave is it's likened unto a man who can't hear, who comes to a discotheque. particular scene, you see. Geiger, dancing, moving all over the place. What the hell are they doing? Must be a madhouse. Goes back to the jungle too, the other guy. Martin Buber put it this way: nobody outside of Christianity can know the mystery of Christianity. No one outside of Judaism can know the mystery of Judaism. No one outside of anything can know its mystery. Unfortunately, in our own people, we have been so left outside. You know, what do they teach us? What do most Jews learn when they grow up? How to read something in a language they're never going to use and don't understand, so they can get a check from Uncle Harry at their bar mitzvah. That's Judaism. But the more you get into it, and the more you absorb the ancient wisdom and the ancient ways, and begin to think in the way of your own people, no matter what people you come from. If you come from Germanic people, if you come from Irish people, if you come from French people, if you come from Native American people, Australia, New Zealand people, every people has a very unique gift of thinking. This is Jew thing. Get used to it. If you're of another tradition, learn about it. Go back to your old German roots, your old Norwegian roots. Way, way before, thousands of years ago. You'd be surprised what you will discover. Richness beyond your wildest dreams. I was sitting with an Icelandic shaman, a shaman from Iceland. I had the honor to meet her. It was amazing. Beautiful woman, old woman with long, long white hair. And so I was introduced to her. We chatted. She speaks Danish. It's not her first language, but it's the second language. I speak Danish. It's not my third language, but it's my eighth language. And it was so amazing. You know, we talked about the different four directions in her tradition, four directions, Jewish tradition. And I asked her what the animals are in her tradition. And they came out exactly the way they are in the Jewish tradition, except they have the dragon in the east, we have the lion in the east. Because they had no lions in Iceland. But they had the bull in the west, like we do in the Jewish tradition. They had the eagle in the north, like we do. They had the lion, and they had the dragon in the east. They had the inner child in the south. We have the human in the south. Some children are human. Some humans are children. Any other questions? Really?
Sorry. This might, I was going to the hotel story.
Yes.
In the Hebrew, is there any doubt when you read the text in Hebrew to whom the story refers? In English translations that I've seen, there's some doubt about whether the Spirit is trying to attack Moses or trying to attack Moses' elder son. And in the Hebrew, is there any doubt about that? That the Spirit is attacking Moses?
Well, in the Hebrew reading, as they're reading the Hebrew, it doesn't cast a doubt on who he's speaking about. No. But it is possible that you can attribute the subject to anybody you want in the way it is written. But in the way that we have been taught for thousands of years of reading, the subject is Moses.
The reason I asked you, I really appreciated your reading of it because coming from my Christian tradition, having studied so much, and when I tried to, I got really interested in the story, and none of the people I was studying with were interested in, or the Old Testament story, we don't care. So I could never go any further into it, and I was always interested in the dynamics of the story. I never got any chance to really see into it until you did it tonight.
Yeah, well, thank you. And you see, when you read the whole story in context, there is no subject other than Moses. You know, so it says that Moses put his woman and his son on a donkey, and he came. Does it say they came to him alone? It says he came to him alone. And then it says, and God sought to dead him. So you'd have to really read this way into it to attribute the hymn to someone other than Moses. And so, very smoothly reading it without trying to reach your left ear with your right hand is Moses. Moses, Moses, Moses. Yeah. Yes.
Going back to what you started off with tonight, where you were saying how to go up would have to go down first.
Yes.
And thinking about Moses, how Moses was in slavery, and yet he never got to enter Israel. So did he ever get to come up, other than to be kind of the messenger and the catalyst?
Well, Moses was never a slave.
Oh.
So he was raised in the house of Pharaoh. It's a funny story. You know, the daughter of Pharaoh takes him in, raises him after he's weaned. And so he's raised as one of the princes of Egypt. So he never experiences that. And so therefore, the coming to the promised land for him is not the same kind of thing. But there's a lot more to that, to why Moses does not get to go into the land. Because Moses is, in his evolution through the desert, comes to a place of consciousness where he is halfway between heaven and earth. He's half spirit, half matter. In other words, he's an almost. And so therefore he almost comes to the land. He sees the land from the mountains. He says he's given the vision of the entire land. He's an almost guy. He never makes it. He's almost made it. Because in order, this is a teaching by the Kabbalistic school of the Maharal of Prague, the great rabbi of Prague in the 16th century, Rabbi Yehuda Loew of Prague. This says, in order to receive the divine revelation and transmit it to the mortal, Moses could be neither of this world nor of that world. And so he had to bring himself to a consciousness where he was not completely here, not completely there. And so then the Maharal tells us, and this we see in the book of Deuteronomy, where it says, after Moses dies, it says, "V'lo yadat ish et makom kiburato at hayom hazeh," and no man or woman knows the place of his burial to this day. It's a strange thing, isn't it? I mean, this is like the guy that took us out of Egypt and made movies and stuff, and then he brings us to the desert for 40 years. He was our leader, he was our father, he was our teacher, he was our mother, he was everything to us. We don't know where the hell he's buried. The Talmud picks up on this and says one day some Bedouins were passing by, and they saw a mound on top of the mountain where Moses spoke his last words. And they called the Jews and said, "We found the burial place of your master." And so the Jews ran up the mountain, and they got there, and there was no mountain. Then the Bedouins said, "Oh, there it is. It was down the valley." They ran down the valley, it wasn't there. It was up there. And they ran back up again, up and down, and they couldn't find it. So the Midrash tells us as a parable, a metaphor, whatever, about the story that Moses had to come to a place of consciousness where he was neither completely here nor completely there. When he got the 10 Commandments, the 2 tablet things, so the Talmud tells us he grabbed onto the lower 3 tefachim, or hand breadths. It was 9 hand breadths tall, the stones. 9 of these, or these, whatever. So he grabbed onto the bottom 3. God grabbed on top 3, and the middle 3 was no one had. And that represents the 3 different categories of the commandments in the Torah. There are commandments in the Torah that make absolutely no sense to the human being. Like not wearing wool and linen the same jacket, kosher laws, a lot of this stuff. Red cow ritual, or turning on a light on the Sabbath. I mean, there's a lot of things that don't make sense to the mortal. Well, maybe not that. So then, there are laws, and that's the 3 handbreadths that God's holding on to. Mystery. Then there are 3 handbreadths that Moses is holding on to. That's the mortal, down to earth laws, like don't steal if you can help it, don't murder, things like that. So, and the in-between ones, not in the hands of God, not in the hands of the mortal of Moses, represent the Edut. These are the testimonies. These are like laws and rituals that symbolize And it neither makes sense in the way they're practiced necessarily, but they are symbolically relevant. They stir things in you. So there are all kinds of beautiful teachings about Moses as being neither of here, neither of there. And therefore he doesn't go to the land because it's irrelevant. Another teaching is he is not allowed to go into the land because if he goes into the land, they'll make a shrine of him, make a god. And we're good at that. Make golden calves by the millions. Any other questions? Yes.
So was Moses didn't completely fulfill his potential then? Is that what you're saying? It was necessary for him to go on?
That's a good way to see it. I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I like that. That he realized his potential. He didn't need the props. You can see it that way. That's a good interpretation. He no longer needed the props that we need in the earthly world in order to achieve or experience our achievement. Thank you. I like that. Anybody else have a teaching or a question? Yes.
One question: does Miriam in any of the teachings have anything to do with dividing waters?
Not to my knowledge, because like for example, when during the 10 plagues, when the water is stricken into blood, so it says God tells Moses to tell Aaron to do that, not Moses. Why? Because you must be grateful to that which helped you. The water saved your life. You can't strike the water into blood. Let Aaron do it. Likewise, with splitting the sea. Miriam is the master of the sea, master of the Wellspring. Therefore, she is not going to be sent to do anything that upsets the way in which the water runs by its natural way. And that's a very important teaching throughout the Jewish ancient teachings about, like I said, do not throw a stone into the well from which you drunk. In other words, you must show gratitude to that which gives you blessing, whether it's a person, an animal, a rock, a wellspring. And so Moses was not allowed to turn the water into blood. Aaron had to do it because the water had saved Moses' life. I'd like to conclude with, you want to lead them that song again? Yevida. Yes, Miriam may drink from the well.
Now, it's such a great piece. Beautiful teachings. Thank you so much this evening. Amazing teachings. Some of you walked in a little bit later, and we did a chant with 3 words. Yerida, Biyad, Aliyah, descension for